creative questions routine, I think can really help students try to figure out some answers on their own. The thing that I really like about it is it sort of democratizes the classroom, right? It takes away me as the teacher knowing everything and allows the students to sort of bring their knowledge to the table, to be able to investigate, to be able to come up with their own questions instead of just answering questions all the time. Welcome, everybody. The first thing we're gonna do, just like we always do, is take a really careful look at this really large work of art. We're then gonna write down what we see. We're then gonna play a game called Creative Questions. And then we're gonna get to play with some art materials. We're gonna get to manipulate them and really figure out how the artist may have made this and do some investigation. Okay? I'd like everybody to hold up their pointer finger for me. We're gonna trace the outline of this work of art really slowly, being sure to look at all of the edges of the work. We're gonna add some movement with our body. And we're gonna move our bodies and kind of sway the way that the artwork moves. All right, let's get nice big movements. And we're gonna come down. Goes all the way up there, reach all the way up. Swoosh over again. One big swoosh, and we're back at the beginning. Okay? Do your bodies feel warmed up? Yes. Do your eyes feel warmed up? Yes. Do your brains feel warmed up? Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and have a seat. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to sort of explore the work of art with our eyes and our bodies, and we looked at the outside, I really want you to focus your eyes on the entire work of art. So look at the inside. You may even want to look at the shadows, the colors, everything that you notice. I'm going to give you 1 minute to really look, and then I'm going to hand out some pieces of paper, and on them there are 3 spaces for you to write what you noticed. So right now, I'm just gonna take 5 things that we've noticed, and that's because I really wanna focus our conversation on the questions and the things that we're wondering about this work of art.
It looked like this cloth with tie-dye and then splattered paint.
It might look like it is some tie-dyed, you're noticing it's tied up as well. Thumbs up if you notice where it is tied. You notice some pieces of string.
When I look at the colors, I see a shadow, like there's an outline of something else behind the colors.
I noticed a rainbow of colors right there. I see blue, orange, purple, turquoise, yellow, green, and they kind of shade together and they make a shade.
I noticed that it's a mountain, the shadow is a mountain.
Interesting. All right, mountain shapes created by shadows. Okay. We're gonna sort of really take this to the next level and think about how it was made, but also think about lots of different possibilities. We are going to play a game called Creative Questions, okay? But all of these questions are gonna be related to this work of art. The first part of this game is that we're going to each select a question from our question jar. So the start of a question is going to be on that strip of paper, and you are going to finish the question. Step 2 is going to be investigating those questions together. And this is a really good way to help us think like an artist. Sam Gilliam, who made this, asked a lot of questions. So your question might start with why. It might start with what are the reasons? What is the purpose of something? How might it be different, right? So thinking about all kinds of possibilities. You might think, suppose that. What if we knew something? What would change if? And what if? Let's practice one all together, and then you'll each pick your own. So let's pretend I stuck my hand in here, pulled one out, and the start of it is, how would it be different if? So if I were going to answer that question, I might say something like, how would it be different if we put it on the floor? So I'm going to come around with our question starters. You're going to choose one. You can start writing your question as soon as you get your slip of paper, and then we'll share them together as a group once everyone is finished. Okay? All right, and let's start over here. If you finish early and you want to do another one, you can do that as well. Just one. You're going to write it right on that piece of paper. Thank you for your question. You're going to read your question out loud so that the whole group can hear it, and then you'll bring that question slip up to me. Okay?
What if this was all one color and the creator did not use multiple colors?
What if we knew how this artwork was created? What would it be like if this painting was on a canvas?
What's a canvas?
We'll talk about what a canvas is. That's a great question.
What would it be like if the president got to see this person's painting?
What if Sam worked with Picasso and was his sidekick?
What if he worked with Picasso and was his sidekick? What an interesting question.
How would it be different if the art was smaller?
What would change if it was made a sculpture?
So one of the things that I like to do when I'm thinking about the questions that have come up is I like to group them so that we can kind of have some different ways to investigate this work of art. So what I was noticing is sort of two groups that were coming out of what you were thinking about. The first one is really, how was this made? The artistic process. And then the other one was sort of this question about, what if he knew different people, right? What if he knew Picasso? What if he knew the president? And maybe they could exchange ideas about art, right? You're going to have an opportunity to touch some artist materials and do some investigation on your own. And I'm going to give each pair a little bag of artist materials. So inside your bag, you will find a paintbrush, a piece of canvas, right, that is on a wooden board. You're also going to get a piece of canvas that looks like this, a piece of string, and last but not least, a paint can. Now, of course, this paint can is empty, so we will have to pretend that there's paint inside. You are going to use these materials with your partner, and you're going to do some investigation. What do I mean by the word investigation?
I think that the word investigate in this point of view means to figure out what the materials can make compared to Sam Gillian's artwork.
Exactly. You're going to think about them and think about how he may have used some of these materials, but you can also think about other possibilities for these materials.
I wonder how this could be like this. He could have got the red. He could have got. See, and then he could have got this.
That looked like tie-dye. It was tie-dye. This was tie-dye.
So if he was doing tie-dye, what do you think, what would that process look like? What would he have to do to the paint? What would he have to do to that canvas?
I think he would have to use a little bit of water.
So I would love for a few of us to share. Van Quell.
Okay, so we made a universal canvas, and for the cloth, we tied it up. Like, can I demonstrate it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we would take this cloth and we would roll it like this way. And after you roll it up, you would take your string. Yeah. Okay, so we would take the string and we would tie it around this. And now, this would be the paint or the tie-dye watercolor thing. And we would dip it in, and this would be rainbow, and we would splatter it all around. And then we would untie it, and then we would open it up. And bam, you have a universal canvas painting.
Can I ask you, you said the word universal canvas. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Okay.
This part is the rainbow, so it's going to be like universal right here. So universal rainbow because the rainbow is around the universe.
So I'm noticing a lot of you are really connecting with this idea of tie-dye, right? And how the paint was applied to this canvas. All right, let's give our artists a round of applause. You guys, a round of snaps. You guys demonstrated a lot of creativity using these different materials. I'd like to just spend a minute telling you a little bit about this artist. One warm spring day in Washington, D.C., Sam Gilliam was sitting in his studio mixing up some paints. And I'm gonna need you to help me tell this story. So let's pretend to mix our paints. He's mixing paints. His canvas pieces were huge, like this one. He would pour his paint on the canvas. We first started out by looking really closely with our eyes, exploring it with our bodies and some movement. And then you guys generated some really amazing questions. Lots and lots of different possibilities for how this could be different, why the artist may have done some things. And then we even got to explore with some artists' materials, right? So I hope that what you will do is when you look at different works of art, think about all those different possibilities. I notice they're learning when they're sort of really engaged, like they wanted to keep writing. I know that they're generating creative questions. I know that they're sort of really thinking about what they're looking at. One of, I think, the biggest tools that we have as educators is letting students play and letting them work things out. And I just noticed as soon as we gave them those materials, it was like they had a ton of new ideas, and then hearing what questions they have as a result of sort of that play, that tactile experience, shows me that they're learning, that they're like thinking like an artist, which is what we're trying to do.